I wanted to show a few things today that I have kind of been wrestling with and trying to figure out as I do e-scouting and taking lessons I've learned in the field and turning them around to improve my e-scouting, looking for similar type places and stuff like that. So we have this glassing spot, this right here. And when I pull up the satellite image, you can see that there is some open space here, and it allows us to glass some of the area that's kind of to the east of this point. And it's less about this specific area and more about like, what does this cover tell us, and like, what can we learn from this? And so if we look at topo, we can see that this is a relatively steep area. You can see here we have, if we go to, which one is this? That's Route Builder. Not that. We go to Line Builder, and we just look at like this line. Let's just say so we're at 8,000 feet there. Let's go to where we would have been. So we gain basically 300 feet of vertical within 300 yards, right? Like that's pretty. It's pretty intense. What I'm trying to do is basically interpolate, kind of like how much space do we need, how much vertical do we need in these really timbered areas to find those little pockets that I actually can glass from. I have gone too many times where I've just looked at topo. Being a new hunter, I've just looked at topo and realized once I got to the point where I was like, this would be a great spot to glass from. I can see everything. That the trees are like 30 feet high and I can't see. No, I could see here from here a decent amount of angle, and I could see for far distances. I could see less so like right directly below me, but more so kind of in some of the canyons that were adjacent, and as well as far away, right? So I could see like, I don't know, 3 to maybe 5 miles away, and even with my SIG Zulu 6s, the 12s, I was able to glass up cows and stuff like that here and there. They were grazing, that far away. I'm sure if I had been able to, if there had been elk in that area, I would have been able to spot them as well, based off of how far I was able to glass. Now, I might not have been able to judge a rack on them, but I would be able to see, okay, here's a herd. There are, cows, there's bulls, etc. If you didn't know, one of the ways that you can typically tell bulls versus cows is the cows tend to be a bit darker all throughout, more kind of that brownish all throughout their body. Bulls tend to be more yellow, and then have those darker manes, darker necks. Lots of people will talk about that, so you should probably have heard that before, but in case you haven't, that's kind of one way that you can tell from far distance. One thing that was interesting here, so we lose like, so I was able to glass from this point and kind of like see this way, and this way. And if we get in really close, we see that we have, what is this? I'm going to use this line tool a lot here to kind of try and figure this out. 65 yards between this and kind of the first tree that we really have. It's about 70 yards, 60 to 70 yards, 45 yards here. And it seemed to me to be a relatively good gauge of whether or not I was going to be able to see a tree. Is if I had 40 to 40 plus yards, let's say, of clearance in front of me, 40 yards with about, I should say, this, what is this, 40 roughly 40 feet of elevation gain over those 40 feet. So basically, like when the elevation gain, how do I say this? Elevation gain plus the distance to the tree is relatively equal, and that is greater than 40 yards, it seemed to be likely that I would be able to glass from that area. So I know that was a little chaos, because I'm trying to like wrap my head around it too. When the elevation gain and the distance between your spot and the next tree are 1-to-1 roughly, you will likely be able to have enough to be able to glass, enough space to be able to glass from that spot, enough the lack of tree coverage to be able to glass from that spot. In this case, let's discard all that. There's a good chance that you could potentially like get under this tree here, or this tree here, or this tree here, maybe even over here, and get some different angles. Again, because we're looking, we'd be looking this way. We'd be looking this way. I want to be able to just like draw on this a little bit easier, but oh well. We'd be looking this way, and we could even look, here, let's undo that last line. We could be going, here to here, so that's 47 yards. So that gap is beneficial. You can kind of like work your way around this, and you could potentially get a couple different views and such like that. Obviously, like here to here is here to here, this 12 yards, you're probably not going to be able to see over this tree, so I'm not going to be able to see this way. But I can kind of get a sense of this, here, 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 and such. So this one might be close, but these other ones, I definitely would be able to. That didn't work. Here, there, type thing. So I'd be able to get, that again, might be close to this one. These look like relatively small trees, so those might not be fully grown yet. Look at the shadows that are being cast by this tree. Like that's, I don't know, I would guess something around a 25-foot tree or something like that. Give or take. Maybe even more based off the shadow. So, just looking at this shadow being cast, and it's covering like half of this elevation gain. If we were to put it directly, that's 40 feet between this point and this point. So this is one thing to kind of have in the back of your head when you're escouting, when that slope angle, and we can even look a little bit like this, right? We can see that this is a pretty crazy slope. And you can even come over here and maybe in some of these pockets where there's some of these smaller trees before some of these bigger ones hit, like I could potentially see something from like right there. Potentially. Now, these small trees, like those could still be like 10-foot, 6-foot trees even, and I can't see over those. So, might not be as helpful, but when we have a bigger clearing like we have right here, that helps us know, oh, okay, I can, I can make use of that. Let's hop over to another section that I saw. Here we are. Here's our next section. Similar type thing. This is instead a west facing. This is instead a west facing. This is kind of annoying how it can kick us out into 3D. Sometimes it's nice, sometimes it's not. A west facing view. From here, I could see some of the North Canyon, the west, the eastern facing face, and south facing as well, with all this clearing here. Again, let's take a look at topo. So here we were at 8,200 feet roughly. Yeah, so I mean, even looking here, like you'd be able to see, like this could potentially be another spot as well, a little bit higher up. Not as much clearance. We pretty much only have this one little pocket right here, this like one straightaway. So it might be nicer to have this one we have here. 8,200 feet. And there's a few little spots where you might be able to even shift. I will tell you, this was like, I think a 16% grade or something like that, according to Onyx, 19%, which is pretty steep, like pretty dang steep. There were multiple times where I was climbing up 3 points of contact and stuff like that. It was this face was relatively like shale and stuff like that. And so if we look at hybrid here, we can see that, okay, we were roughly in this same sense of, if we pull out our line tool, here to here, 60 yards. It's not quite straight, but that's almost 80 feet of elevation gain, 70 feet, let's say, of elevation gain over those 60 yards. So again, 1-to-1, greater than 1-to-1 in this case. And I was able to glass from here. Like I said, I don't remember if I ended up sitting in this exact spot or if I ended up kind of shifting around. I was like trying to figure out where I wanted to go up here. But I was able to get a really good sense and a really good view pretty much from this tree. So this tree was too tall for me to really see past. So anything from this tree over this way. So that's an interesting point. If we look at, I don't want an area tool, thank you. This line to this tree, that's 36 yards. That tells me that tree was probably 50 feet, I would guess. Like, that tree was tall. But when we get over here, we're looking at some smaller trees, 50 yards. And I'm just kind of, well, one, I was there, so I was able to see that. But two, like, you can kind of tell from the base of the tree how big it looks, which might be easier or harder depending on how clumped together it is. But then the shadows, like comparison, right? Like this looks a lot smaller compared to this one. This is not a perfect science, but I'm trying to get a sense of like, okay, what are worthwhile ways to find out while I'm e-scouting, this is a spot I can glass from, and not something that's just going to be totally, I'm going to really totally be under a canopy, not able to see anything from that spot. So here's an example of a spot that might be interesting, but that could end up being somewhat like risky to get to. I like to use purple for areas that the areas that I like, but might not actually end up being a thing. So let's look at this. Let's try to apply some of the same principles. So we have this clearing here. It's not super big. You could potentially put this in Google Earth Pro and see if you get a higher fidelity image. Honestly, I went and checked. The image we had from there was 2014. Not it was snowed out. Not even really as good of an image as this. But I think that this is telling us what we need to know here. Likely is, it looks like even this pin might be under some trees, and the best we got here is 35 yards. These look like some pretty healthy trees here. Some that are dead and stuff like that too. I find it highly unlikely we would be able to actually glass from this point. I think that we would actually, these trees are pretty tall. We would end up not being able to see very far, and the elevation that we have, like this is slightly less than 40 yards over the 40 feet. Here, let's see if we can get a rough estimate here. Yeah, so we're slightly higher than 1 to 1, and between that and the amount of distance we have here, I don't think we're going to end up being able to see much from here. Now we could get there, and maybe we still do a path that we can kind of skirt by this, and then we get there and like, actually we can see more than we think. But probability wise, I think it would end up being less than we would hope. And there's not a lot of other options like around here either that I'm like, oh, maybe this, like we could just bump over here and still see some stuff. So that's an example of one that I'm like, if I were a betting man, I probably wouldn't make a play to get over here to this point. Instead would look for some other productive ones on the map. So let's do that. Let's look for another one. See if we can find one that ends up being more what we would like to see. So here we have found, this is like really open. The one thing I would have to say about this spot, and you can tell that like it's getting some snow. This is a south facing slope. So we have some north facing slopes that you can basically glass from. I would have to look at like how far this is from the road and stuff like that. But this would be somewhere where I'm like, this could be, a potential glassing spot. We could definitely look. From here, we could even move around, it looks like, and bounce around to some of these other like sides. It's hard to tell. Yeah, that's like, yeah, those are big trees, from what I can tell. So getting back up in here, these are small stuff. This is all small stuff. And with this, this is like significant, right? We should have a lot of area to be able to see here. 100, 200 yards. This is a great option. But even when we get into here, like if we look right here, which is kind of just like an offshoot. Let's look at this. This is, I don't know, again, 40-yard elevation lines. Let's see. Keep hitting the wrong buttons. 56 yards. Potentially some of this could block us, but we're at, what is this? Yeah, just over 40 yards. We're just over 1-to-1 right here. Whereas like here, it's gotten even more steep. 31, so 40 yards of elevation gain over 31 yards. So maybe even right here, being able to tuck back in here, or this right here, we'd be able to get a decent view even over some of these smaller stuff. We could throw another waypoint here. And so what I would do is then I would look to throw these in a folder for next season and potential places to like scout and such. This side is actually more west facing. We'd be able to see the western slopes and stuff like that. Whereas this one was more south facing. We'd be able to see some north slopes, etc. So pretty high up here. It's not that high up actually comparatively. We get up to probably 87 on this mountain. So yeah, one other thing that you can do is use a couple other tools, right? We talked about using Google Earth Pro, and looking there, we could potentially look at something like that on Go Hunt as well. Mark Livesey talks about having 2 points in the field, two mapping softwares in the field. That way, in case one goes down, you have the option for the other one. And exporting whatever your main one is, exporting all your waypoints over from it to that secondary one. So that for me is I use Onyx, and then I use Go Hunt, and I have the last 2 years as my secondary. Having that third option of a map to look at can be beneficial. And so here we are in Go Hunt. We can do some similar things. Give me a minute to change this to the hybrid. So here we are. We have some similar senses here. I do wish like anything had the ability to timestamp. They do have kind of a cooler tool, right? So I don't understand the difference between the numbers here. Direct. Oh, okay. Direct horizontal. Got it. Okay. So you can see that like we should be able to have some clearance here. And if we look at some of the shadows on these trees, like that's probably not far enough. We're probably going to be blocked by that tree, but we'll have some views here, views this way. Definitely views this way based off of our elevation gain. All right. So, yeah, ultimately, like you can make some judgments based off of this. I would definitely say like test these things out for yourself in the field. Look at like what what you find to be similar type places you can glass from, etc. Similar type places that are clearings that you can glass from. Don't silhouette yourself when you're doing these. So honestly, looking at this, while that may have been great, this probably is less beneficial than almost even just bouncing around over here, provided we can, and dropping down into some of this. And glassing from like maybe here or something like that, provided we can. That doesn't look to be too steep to where we couldn't like shuffle down it and sit. I'm still learning these things, so it would be we could even get up here. We wouldn't have to come that far down the hill. Be able to sit kind of right near the top. All that to say, I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still trying to figure these things out. And trying to help and kind of provide ideas as I learn things and make up my own strategies for being able to find animals. Hopefully you like this. If you have other ideas, other things that you've learned that you think would be beneficial, or please put them in the comments, comment, interact with the content anyway. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.